I was sexually assaulted by my auntie when I was 3 years old, and I burnt that trailer to the ground. And I remember my dad saying, I knew something happened. Something happened to you in that trailer.
You burnt a trailer down
I burnt the trailer to the ground.
at 3 years old?
3 years old, yeah.
You remember?
I remember it. That was my earliest childhood memory.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
Derek, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for driving up on a Sunday morning. This is great.
Yeah, no, beautiful drive, so.
Yeah. So we both grew up in Indian Head, but the story's not really about me. It's about you. So why don't you tell me what it was like growing up in Indian Head?
The one house out in Indian Head that I grew up in, was a house full of addicts. My mom wasn't an addict, but she had her own issues, and my stepdad was a full-on drunk. And, I was raised in that environment for a lot of years, and I witnessed a lot of domestic abuse and suffered some abuse myself growing up through that way of upbringing too.
Mm-hmm.
And, Indian Head was kind of a tough community in some ways to grow up in. And, being a Métis boy with fair-skinned, I didn't fit in a lot of things, Where I did fit in was with my cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And even there, too, I really didn't fit in that great with them. I was fair-skinned, and I had parents. I had a dad. I had two dads, actually, in my life, right?
Mm.
And a lot of my cousins didn't have any father figure at all. So, I always had that lost identity, and no matter where I went, school was a failure for me. With my ADHD, my dyslexia, I was not a very good student at all. My classroom was in the gymnasium. That's how my teachers taught me for a lot of years was, we can't manage this kid. We don't know what to do with this kid. So they just put me in the gym to run around with other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when a lot of the bullying for me began, because I was separated from my peers and from those classrooms. And, I wasn't a very big kid. I was always really small. And I didn't really stick up for myself. I valued that friendship, and I thought if I fought my friends, then they wouldn't be my friends no more. So I took a lot of the abuse and a lot of crap from a lot of guys growing up, right?
Yeah. So when did things start to go sideways for you? I remember you had a Pulsar or something, didn't you?
Nissan Pulsar, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember smoking oil with you off your lighter, sitting outside the doctor's office there one day across from Leo's.
Yeah, we definitely did that, yeah.
Yeah.
My first sort of use was when I was about 13 years old. Like, I probably had a few sips and I, had a few drinks there, but it really didn't start taking off till about 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember, getting drunk, with a bunch of friends and running around town and having stories, it was
throwing crab apples and stealing hood ornaments.
Doing stuff like that, falling in the creek, things like that. And all of a sudden people would start talking about you. Oh, you know what he did this weekend, and he did this, and then all of a sudden it got me attention, right? Yeah. And I bet you by the time I was about 13, I think I would say I was pretty much a full-blown alcoholic. I was drinking every day, because I remember my 13th birthday. I drank a 2-6 in under an hour.
Wow.
And I was probably 72, 73 pounds then too, right? And I got alcohol poisoning and ended up in the hospital. I remember actually coming home and I puked all over my mom.
Mm.
And my mom and my stepdad takes me to the hospital. My stepdad was drunk taking me to the hospital, like that's the kind of life I lived in. And I got to the hospital. I remember getting my stomach pumped and saying, no, I never want to go through this again. I'm never drinking again. I'm not doing this. And the very next day when I got out of the hospital, I was back drinking with my friends again. And a lot of these were my cousins at this time too, right? And they were always in a lot of trouble. And, it was one thing that was real tough in those days was my last name. I grew up in a town, being Racette, that all my cousins were jailbirds. They were in trouble. Like, one of my cousins asked the cop, like it was pretty wild. And carrying that last name Racette around that town, I would go to people's houses and they said, no, Racettes are allowed in my house, right? And then they'd find out whose kid I was. Oh, you're Calvin's boy. Oh, then that's fine. He can play with Calvin's boy. Calvin's a good guy, right? But all my other cousins, they never were allowed. And that was my world. So I had this air, I got this air as soon as I went to other people's houses, right?
Which cop was that?
Pat Node.
It was Pat Node. That was my neighbor.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty wild anyways.
That's wild, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that until just this moment.
Yeah, so that Racette name was a tough name to carry around Indian Head for a long time.
I remember, that sort of almost struck fear, know. So, yeah.
I would imagine it did, and it did for a lot of that community. You bet it did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's those Racettes, and I really loved my sports. I was a good track star, basketball, volleyball, hockey, you name it, I played it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I lost a race. You know, I remember I was about 15 years old, and it was my first track and field race I'd lost. I'd never lost a 100-meter sprint until I was about 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that first time I lost, I was like, I was done. I give up. I'm not a champion no more, right? And I just threw it all away. And I said, well, hey, I'm going to try cannabis, right? I wouldn't even try cigarettes, nothing. I refused to smoke, right? And then that's when I was introduced to cannabis for the first time. And the first time I immediately fell in love. You know, there was no turning back. The laughter, the enjoyment, the no care anymore, you know. It was just like I had fun with my boys, and life became that, you know. And I can remember my stepdad coming home one night drunk from the bar, and we were smoking weed in the house, not oil.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes flying in the house drunk, and he's like, what's that smell, boy? I said, oh, American cigarettes. Don't bullshit me. I know what that smell is. Let's have some.
Oh, no.
And I was like, what? He's like, light it up. I said, how about you? Because I thought he was tricking me, right? So he's holding a joint in his mouth, and he couldn't even light it. He was so hammered, right? So I had to push the lighter under the joint for him to smoke it. He takes a couple, I'm good. Good night, right? And it was just like, whoa, I just smoked weed with my stepdad, right?
Yeah, what just happened there?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it was the first experience I kind of had with that. And, you know, it happened more and more with my stepdad, you know, and I really didn't like this guy. I really was not a great kid to him. I always called him, you're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do. I hate you, you know. You hit my mom. You talk like this to my sisters. I really despised that man, you know. And when I was about 14 was the first physical confrontation I had with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up beating him up, right? And I had to leave and move out of my mom's house for a little while, and I lived across the street, my cousin Kim's house. And did that for a while. But then this is when I come kind of back into the house, you know, 16 years old, and I got a new light. You know, I started seeing this guy in a different picture because I smoked dope with him. You know how sick that is. Like,
Well, how was it? Hang on now, but you beat him up too.
Yeah, when I was about 14.
That
Yeah,
must have changed your lens on him as well.
it sure did. Yeah, and it did for both of us. Like, and then there was no control. He couldn't tell me what to do no more. You know, stuff like that. And I became a very sort of obnoxious kid, even to my mother too. Right. This was right around the time when sort of my life really started changing. Right. I ended up getting the Nissan Pulsar, you know, getting my license, and I was the only one in my peer group, out of my friend group, that had a car, who had a license, and all of a sudden we started getting to the city life, and then that's when some of the psychedelics started to take effect, right? We found some acid one night, we found mushrooms, and, you know, started doing all those sort of things, and man, that first time I ate mushrooms, it was a game changer, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did they teach you anything?
Oh man, it was the first time I think in my life that I started to look at music for the poetry, for the art in it, right? You know, and I always say drugs will never make you smarter, but I can honestly say that mushrooms made me a smarter person. It made me look at the world in a different light. And I had graduated school by this time.
Mm-hmm.
And a wild thing of this was, you know, I had just started university. I had a baby girl that was just born. You know, I had a high school sweetheart that we got together, and we moved to Regina.
Mm-hmm.
And
so when did it start to get unmanageable then? So you're in university now.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And life is going on. Life is going well.
Yeah, university was really well. Yeah. Where I really say they really started to take a turn of verse was when my stepdad passed away in 2014. You know, I was teaching. You know, I had a job. I had family. I had two of my kids living with me full time.
Wow.
My oldest daughter was all messed up and a whole bunch of stuff by that time already. But I also had a lot of guilt and shame because it's just like I hated this guy. You know, in so many ways I hate him. The wrong things he did, and so many wrong things. And when I felt that I should have buried that guy. You know, and I felt like that all the time. But deep down inside, I loved him. You know, and I never got a chance to tell him that I did love him. And, you know, I did love him. He taught me a lot of good things. You know, he took me hunting, took me fishing. He partied with me, you know, and that's when it really started taking a turn for the worse. Using cocaine quite regularly at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity was there to start selling it. And this gave me power. This gave me control of everyone and everything. When you live in a small town and you're one of the only cocaine dealers in a small town, it was all about power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was so busy within the community. I was on the volunteer fire department. I was coaching hockey. I was a referee in chief. I was ref in hockey. I didn't have time to be doing it, but I wanted those people around me. I wanted those friends around me. So if I sold it, those people would be around, right? And I gave it away just to have people around me in some cases. But then I would use that against them to say, you owe me money, and then I started threatening. It changed me, right? That power of being a dealer. But the error I had at that time too, especially being a Monday to Friday school teacher and having a big bag of blow sitting at home too while I was sitting there in the classroom teaching, right? It was like, whoa, what am I doing, right? But being an intelligent guy, I always made sure my end was covered, right? Like I was dealing for a gang, right? And they made sure I was very safe and very protected, and they knew, they had ins, that if someone was going to come kick down my door, if the cops were going to show up, that they would give me a heads up, right?
So there was a gang occupation in Indian Head.
Well, to a little point. I know not like that you'd see it visually, but where there's drugs, there's going to be gangs, especially in that.
And there was protection.
With that quantity that I was selling at that time too.
So you got big.
I was moving about 8 ounces to 9 ounces every single week in a small town of 1,800 people, right?
That's a lot.
It sure is, yeah.
I did.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane, and it was all weekends mostly. It was the party. We had senior hockey going on. We had everything going on.
Well, and there's the res right close there too, right?
There sure was. Yeah.
So I'm sure there was something going back and forth there.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
And I had 2 guys that were under me that were pushing it and into the younger guys, right? That was.
Were you jumped in?
What's that? No, it wasn't like that. No.
Yeah. Okay.
It was. I kind of got into it, and then they realized that I was pushing all this, and 2 guys on bikes showed up at my door one day and said, "You're selling for us," and that's kind of all it was.
You said okay.
Oh, I sure did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was. It was a very scary moment, and like they were probably about 6'6", 6'8", 300-pound plus both.
Did
tattoos.
they come in like friendly?
Yeah, at first they did. Very friendly. They said, "Hey, how's it going?" They didn't tell me names. They said, "Who are you guys?" And they just said, "We're coming in." And then they come in and said, "Hey, where are you getting your shit from?"
Uh-huh.
I was just like, I don't want to tell you guys. You either tell us or we'll make you tell us.
Yeah.
I was just like, holy, okay, it's this and this person. Okay, that's good. That's our supply. As long as you keep it up, then that's okay with us.
Huh.
Yeah.
You moved so much that the bikers came and had a conversation.
Yeah.
That's saying something, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where'd it go from there?
It progressively got worse, the more, and the money. It was the money that was the most attractive thing to me. I had money to do whatever, wherever, however I wanted it, anytime, and then, so I started going to the bars, and I'd buy the whole bar drinks all night, $1,000 bar tab. And man, with that came a lot more friends, right? A lot more partying, and I can remember from Friday night till Sunday, I wouldn't be in the house. Ended up moving in with my sister into the basement. My mom, she became very sick. She was dealing with lung cancer. Like I was doing 7 to 10 grams of cocaine a day at that time, and my nose was so plugged up. I couldn't even get anything in there, and I was like, oh, wow, there's some soda. Here's this. Let's cook some up. If I can't snort it, I might as well smoke it. Life just took the most drastic change at that time. I isolated my basement. I sold drugs out of my basement window, and I only sold at that time to pay for my habit. So it didn't cost me nothing, right? And my progression, my whole life just started going downhill slowly but surely at this point. I'd broken up from a relationship. Doctor had prescribed me antidepressants, sleep aids, all these other things, all these prescribed medications I was taking. I was smoking crack. I was drinking every day. And I didn't want to hang out with people because I wanted to be smoking crack. And being a crack smoker in a small town was, not publicly, not socially acceptable. But if you were a cokehead, that was okay. You could do coke, but not the crackhead, right? So I used the excuse that my mom's sick. My mom's going through cancer, I shared that with my administration and stuff. So they kind of thought that's what was going on in my life more so than the drug use, right? That I was dealing with all this stuff, that I was on antidepressants and I was not sleeping right and I wasn't doing this. So I was able to kind of blow off my addiction a little bit because I was dealing with all that stuff too, right? And the world of COVID, started happening. It started to take place, right? And I can remember not being able to go to my job no more, having to teach from behind a computer screen, doing that sort of stuff. And this is when my disease absolutely went full blown, right? I could now use and do my job. I could move away from the computer screen and then come back to the computer screen. I didn't even have to have my webcam on. I could just do it all through typing, through emails, whatever it had to be, right? would have been January 17th of 2020. My mom passed away of COVID. And that's when I threw everything away. I quit teaching. A lot of drinking, a lot of fighting, a lot of using, a lot of women using, you know, a lot of that sort of stuff. This chased a lot of people out of my life, you know, and I wanted that at that time because I could smoke crack. If people were around, I couldn't smoke crack. I had to do cocaine with them, and I'd always just chase people out so that I could use crack again, right? Or go hide in my bathroom and have a quick couple and then come back out. You know, in February of 2021, my life really changed, you know. I had a bit of a beef with one of my cousins. He caught me. He beat the living piss out of me, right? You know, brain bleed and smashed my head and concussed me. And you know, the funny thing was, in 10 days before that, I was on top of him, choking him, saying, "You're lucky you're my cousin or I'd kill you." But I remember going home, and I still have videos, pictures on my phone where I'm smiling. I'm blood covered, you know, my pupils are massive from the concussion, and I'm smiling. Just smiling and laughing, you know. And I'm plotting revenge. I'm going to get even with this fucker, sort of thing, you know. And I had a lot of resentment towards him for quite a while. But, you know, I look back at that moment now, and I've got a lot of gratitude. That's the last time I ever touched alcohol. My disease told me that if you're not drunk, if you're not so wasted like that, you don't lose that fight. That doesn't happen to you, you know.
So you got sober on a resentment.
It's exactly it.
So did I.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it, but it worked for me.
You know, it's pretty freaking wild how it did. And then I met a woman. And this woman I started bringing into my life. And how I got her kind of coming into my life is I always had alcohol in the fridge for her. So after she's done partying at 2 a.m, she'd always come over to me because she knew I had liquor in the fridge, right? So then she'd spend the night. And she did cocaine too. And she was just like, "Oh, no, you can't have that. I know you're good," sort of thing. And it lasted maybe 2-3 days. You know, of her coming over. I was just like, "Let me have one of those. Let me have one of those." And this is when the shit went really sour, right? I fell in love. I put this woman on pedestal. This is during COVID with isolation. She was with me full time in my house. And she changed me. She changed everything about me. It hurt. And then after we finally did split, this is when the suicide really started coming into my play in my life, right? Where I really started taking serious notes about this, making plans, writing things down, you know. And I remember I had a knife, you know, it was a sharp filleting knife too, right? I just go in the cupboard and I go and I fucking give my wrist a go, right? And it didn't really cut. And I was just like, "Oh, well, that sucks. I've got a sharpening stone here." So I'm sitting there at the table and I'm sharpening up this fucking filleting knife, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. So I open the door and it's 2 RCMP officers. I was like, "Is so-and-so here?" "Oh, no, they live down the street." "Oh, well, we got a call from their house." "Yeah, they live down the street." And then he looked down and see my wrist bleed. He's like, "Derek, what's going on?" I slammed the door. Oh, locked it, dead bolted it. And he's kicking and hammering. "Derek, let me in. Let me in. What's going on?" Here, this RCMP officer, I coached this kid in hockey. This guy had feelings. He seen the good in me and knew there was a lot of good in me, and when I couldn't see the good in myself. And he didn't leave that door. He didn't. He kept banging on it. It's like, fuck, you know, I can't even kill myself in peace, right?
Sorry, I don't know why that's funny, but
it's true, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't. I said, "Do you want me to take you to the hospital or do you want to go yourself?" I said, "Well, you might as well take me."
Yeah.
So I'm going to the hospital, and this was sort of the first time I ended up in the Indian hospital with an attempted suicide, right? And the doctors and the nurses were not what I needed at that time, you know, like they just blew it off on drug use. They didn't know all the mental illness I was going with. They weren't equipped to deal with mental illness at that time, for surely not in the Indian hospital. It was, you know, small town. They didn't deal with that stuff. And my assumption is that I'd be locked up in a psych ward, right? And they didn't. They let me go home that night, you know? And, you know, I had got back into teaching. I started teaching. I carried the kettle at that time.
Yeah.
And I was teaching a high school program. And I actually kind of got my life back on track a little bit.
Yeah.
And this woman was still in and out of my life periodically, like this one that was, you know, my disease. That was the one that really, really crippled me. At the end of that year, that contract ended. Of course, I can see why. They didn't renew the contract. They didn't want to hire me again, right? And there was my second attempt at suicide this time, and it was every pill I had in my house. I remember I had gotten to a big fight with this woman. That was the actual end of it all. I didn't want to live no more. And here I didn't even write a letter this time. This was all just to spite her, right? And I remember going to the hospital because I knew I'd done wrong, and I couldn't even puke. It wouldn't even come out of me, right? And I'm losing my shit, I'm like, I'm going to die. I don't want to die. And I remember one of the nurses in the background, and she made a comment. She says, "Oh, I'll just give up on him. He's a lost cause." And I had a flickering moment, in that moment.
Another resentment.
Yeah, exactly. Resentment again. Like, fuck this woman, right? And
Yeah.
it was, I guess, in 2023, in August of 2023, I ended up getting another teaching job out at Pipot First Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady who was the administrator at that time was a good friend of mine from university. With the job came money. And with the money came the drugs. As soon as I get that paycheck. December 6th of 2023, I admitted to her. I said, I relapsed. I'm struggling with drugs. I need to go to treatment. She says, "You know what? Thank you for your honesty. I want my teacher. I want you, Derek. Go to treatment or get yourself fixed."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Okay, I appreciate that." And I remember she said, "Okay, we're going to take all your summer." I was paying into a summer fund. She goes, "I'll pay you out all your summer fund, and I'll give you an additional month's pay at this time too, just so you have some time for when you go to treatment." A little over $30,000 put in my bank. I got that money, I think it was on December 20th or 21st. Well, on December 21st, I ended up getting pulled over by an RCMP officer in Indian Head. And I didn't have a license. I didn't have plates. And I ended up getting assaulted by this cop. He punched me right in the throat. And I tackled this cop. I wrestled this cop on the ground. And I remember he was like trying to get me in cuffs, and I spun out of it and I got behind him. I said, "You want me to put you in cuffs?" And this is in front of the elementary school at 4 o'clock in the
Would you like me to put you in cuffs, sir?
This is 4 o'clock in the afternoon in front of the Indian Head Elementary School. And I'm a teacher, what's going on?
Everyone's watching?
Oh, that school was dismissed. It was during you must have an early dismissal, but some of the teachers from Indian Head School were coming out of the school.
Just like standing with their
Yeah.
coffee mugs?
Yeah, watching us all go down, right? And he turns around and looks at me and says, "I can't believe you're a teacher." I said, "I can't believe you're a cop."
Whoa.
Right? And so he finally gets me in cuffs and throws me in the back and starts going. And I said, "You got a camera in here. I'm going to charge you for assault," and punch me right in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Well, come step out of the car with me." He's like, "If you don't say nothing, I don't say nothing. I'll let you walk away. I'll walk away from this too." I said, "Well, let me have my car then." He says, "No, I can't do that." It was another act of God, I call it. That happened to me where he took my car, he took that. But I was so mad, and I didn't have a way now to go to the city to get my drugs, right? Then the hardest thing that I had to come to terms with, and I'm still coming to terms with, was on December 24th of 2023, my 25-year-old daughter, Kayla, died of fentanyl overdose. And that was 5 days before I was supposed to go to treatment. And needless to say, I didn't end up going to treatment. I had maybe about $27,000 in the bank at this time, and I used.
Trying to die.
I was trying to die. I sure was, right? I was trying to end it. And I didn't. Just kept waking up, right? Like it was messed. I couldn't believe the size of the quantity I was doing at one time. And I never realized that it was my higher power keeping me alive at this time through all this, I come to realization that it was for sure that I'm destined for something else, something grander. And I don't know what that is yet, but I think I'm starting to come to understand what that is, right? And I didn't know what to do. So for the next 60 days, maybe, I spent all $27,000. I had a gun. I had a 22. I still have the 22, but I was sitting there and I was like, okay. And I wrote out, oh man, I had about 8 to 10 suicide notes. And every one of these notes, it inflict pain on someone else before I was going to end myself. Like I was going to drive a car head on to them, even though I didn't even have a car, but I was going to do that. Go steal one, go do whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I was going to go get even with my cousin that did me wrong. I was going to go get my ex-wife who did me wrong, that girlfriend who did me wrong, it was sick, man. And I had this gun. I was going to go do this shit, right? And
so you weren't talking suicide. You were going
murder, suicide.
Oh, okay.
That was my plan this time. I'm going to kill them, and then I'm going to take myself. Okay. And all of a sudden, I just turned on myself. I said, "Fuck, boy, I'm just going to end it here right now." And I had the gun loaded, and I was holding it down under my chin, and it was a 22, and like a semi-automatic. Can I get 2 shots off with this 22? Right? That's the thing. I want to make sure it's over. And I looked up, and there was this Father's Day project my daughter made when she was in grade 6, and it was right there hanging in the window. And I looked at that thing in 5 years, maybe 10 years, and it was just hanging right there. was like, what the fuck is going on, man?
The daughter who passed.
Yeah, the daughter who passed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was there. It was just, I get chills whenever I say that story, right? And I was just like, what the hell, right? So I was like, man, I'm going to the hospital. Put down the gun. I was at a point where I wanted to be locked up in a psych ward, but I didn't know what was out there, what available was for mental illness and for getting me the support I needed at this time, right? I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live how I was living anymore. I knew that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a ride from the Indian Head Hospital to Regina Hospital, to the General Hospital in Regina. And my dad met me at the General Hospital, and they went to go see a psych nurse at that time, a psych doctor. And we were talking. And immediately they wanted to lock me up in a psych ward. And my dad pipes up and he says, you don't cage a wild animal. What other services are available to my son? What can you do? You can't put him in that place. This is not going to be good for him. I don't want him going to that. Like, there's got to be something else for him to help him with this stuff, with his addiction, with this. She goes, oh, addiction. Yeah. Well, there's this place called Detox. And I've never even heard of Detox. This is how naive I was and so isolated in that small town. I never even heard of a detox. He's like, well, we got brief and social detox.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll try it out. So I ended up calling, and right away they said, we can get you in 5 days. So my dad's like, well, you're going to stay with me. I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you. You know, at least that way I can take care of you. I can watch over you. And so I went and stayed with my dad at this time, and it was the first time I experienced dope sickness in my life, right? Holy man, like for 3 days I was so sick. Like that movie Trainspotting, that was the sort of shit that was happening to me. I was hallucinating, I was sweating, I was cold sweating, you know, had the shits, I couldn't eat, you know, couldn't even smoke, you know, it was rank, right? I was pale, I was skinny, you know, and I was of course skinny from the addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
From using. I was under 150 pounds at this time.
Mm-hmm. You're tall. You're like,
Yeah,
what, 6'2"?
6'1".
6'1"?
Yeah. And I'm 150 pounds. And you know, to me, I thought I looked good. You could see a six pack, you know, every muscle in my body, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm looking good. And then
Junkie chic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my skin's gray. You know, I have no color about me. I'm just, My dad, I remember he went to bed early that night. And it was 2 days before I was supposed to go to Detox. And left his wallet out. And, you know, I'd never stolen from my dad my whole entire life. And I dug in his wallet and I stole $20. And the dealer was, you know, about a kilometer and a half away. You know, I didn't take his car. I decided to walk. This is fucking cold. February, end of February. I'm walking in shoes because I don't have winter boots. I got mitts and a scarf on. And I'm walking down Victoria Avenue.
And like a shirt.
No, I had a coat. I had a coat. Yeah,
Just mitts in it.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm walking to the trailer park in Glen Elm there.
Yeah.
And I had this $20. And the guy's like, well, I'll sell you 20. And so, you know, okay, that's it. You know, immediately I'm thinking, okay, I'll get him for this 20 and then I'll get him for more sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I put it in one and I smoked it, right? And the moment I did that was the first time I felt all that guilt, all that shame, everything. It was just like, hit me like a ton of bricks. And then the next day we ended up going to Detox in Regina. It was February 28th, 2024 is my actual clean date.
Wellness News, Choice for Healthy Living, is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness-related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals, locally allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. Parenting in the Storm is a 2-day experiential retreat-style workshop Donna and I created based on our own lived experiences with parenting through addiction, child apprehension, family court, and the long road back to trust and connection. It's a space for parents or caregivers in or seeking recovery who want to rebuild communication, peace, and hope with their partner or co-parent and model healthy relationships for their children. We don't come as clinicians. We come as parents who've walked that path and are finding our way back. If you want more information or would like to bring Parenting in the Storm to your community or organization, or even if you'd like to make a donation so we can bring this to more parents, all that information is in the show notes below. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways. By becoming a paid member right here on YouTube and get early access to new episodes, you can buy us a coffee or you can pick up some merch. Links to all that stuff is in the show notes below. And of course, always remember to give us a like, leave us a comment, and if you're new, a sub to the channel would mean the world to us because it all helps us keep getting louder.
That first day, of course, I was kind of in there like exposed to addicts that they had lived a life, you know, gangsters to prostitutes to, you know, everything and anything. And here's me, educated school teacher who grew up with 2 homes, never lived on the streets in his life, and I'm in the same place that all these people
You
are.
had bikers in your kitchen, bro. Like, let's not like sugarcoat that too much.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But
Flooding the prairies with cocaine. Oh, I never did none of that.
I guess.
Yeah.
But
Anyways, welcome back to Earth.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't. I still didn't identify
Okay.
with those sort of people in that capacity, right? And I wanted to see myself as different. I was different, you know. I was very egotistical, very naive, saying I'm educated, I'm bright, I'm smart, I got all these tools, I just don't know how to access them, right? And after that first day in Detox, I was humbled, immediately humbled, you know, because I started listening to these people and they're telling their stories, and their stories were the exact same as mine. That first day, NA came in, or AA came in, and the guy who chaired that meeting was a guy in my past, and I ended up asking that guy to be my sponsor. You know, it was like 5 days into Detox. I was calling this guy to ask to be my sponsor.
Still like scratching, hey?
and he says, "We'll meet when you get out of Detox."
Can we start at step 9?
Yeah. and the second day, NA came into that room, and I related more with the NA than the AA. I had almost 3-4 years under my belt free of alcohol, right? But I only had a few days from the drugs, right? And this guy come in for the NA and chaired that meeting, and I connected. It was, wow, this really means something to me. But part of me wasn't ready to just jump in that. And this guy who chaired this meeting, I remember, he's now my sponsor. The guy who chaired that very first NA meeting I went to, he told a story. He talked about recovery and something. And one of the things they said in that first meeting was complete abstinence from all drugs. And I didn't think that was a problem. I only had to get away from the crack and the cocaine. I could still do weed. I could still do mushrooms.
That was your intention.
My intention at that time, right?
Okay.
It was at that time. And I was like, I got to do mushrooms again. You know, they never did me harm, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of that meeting, I remember I went up to go shake his hand because his story connected to me. And he gives me a hug, and I push away. You know, at this time, I was starting to experience a lot of spiritual things happening to me in Detox. And it was connected to my culture. You know, I started smudging. I started playing a hand drum. I started seeing my creator, you know, working in my life in every which way.
Because people told you to, or because they just came into your life?
It just happened.
It was
it just was happening, man. Like, it was absolutely wild. Well, on day 2 of Detox 2, one of my friends that I grew up with in high school who bullied me, who had a huge resentment, and then I bullied him in the later years because he did that to me when we were teenagers. He showed up in Detox, and I hated this guy. I wanted to hurt him, you know. And the first day he showed up in Detox, I was calling him by his sister's name. I knew what his sister's name was, but I kept calling him by his sister's name just to be intimidated. I was still so sick, right? And eventually, after about half day, 3/4 day, he says, "Well, you know, my name's this." I said, "Oh, is it?" You know, knowing full well that it was his name, but I still called him by his sister, right?
Wow.
And you know, he was pretty sick too, and you know, I didn't see a lot of him. He was always in his room and all that sort of stuff, and things started happening to me. You know, like my deceased daughter, her spirit encompassed another girl in Detox, and I could smell her, I could see her, everything. It was absolutely wild, you know. And this friend that I grew up with in Indian, he seen it too. He knew it was my daughter too. I call him a friend now. At that time, he wasn't my friend, but he's one of my best friends in life now through the recovery process, right? And that night, after doing all this smudge ceremony and doing all this, a couple people came in with NA, and they started talking about resentments and amends. And me and him, you know, we were so far away from that. I felt like, you know, I still wanted to hurt him, you know, like what he did to me when we were teenagers. Like he kicked me in the nuts and kneed me, you know, didn't give me a chance to defend myself. He just did this to me, right? And so we're sitting there at the end of this meeting, and we're both sitting there shoulder to shoulder, and he says, "You know, that was a good meeting." I said, "Yeah, it was. You ready to hear this?" I said, "Yeah, I think I owe you an amend too." And it was the first amend I ever made in my life. And he said he was in recovery in the AA world for 20 years, and he was in the NA world for 15 years. And I was on his set of steps every year to make this amend to me, but he didn't know how to do it because I was going to hurt him, he felt, right? And I probably would have. And I wouldn't have accepted it at that time. I was so sick too. And we did. It was that first amend I ever made with someone. And man, the weight that was lifted off me was absolutely amazing, right? And doing that. And then after I got out of Detox, of course, I started doing the AA thing. And
Tell me about your first meeting.
Outside of Detox? Well, I was with this guy who has to be my sponsor.
Okay.
And we went to this meeting in the basement of a church. And it was all old people. Like, there was no young souls in there at all, right?
Yeah.
I felt like a kid in that room, right? There was all these old people. And they were talking what I wanted to hear. They were talking about recovery. They were talking about the big book. They were talking about spiritual stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I still had a problem. My disease was telling me, this is not for you. This is God. This is the church. This is religion. Yeah. This is not spirituality. This is religion. These guys are all here talking the Lord's Prayer and reading the Bible. Like, that's what I was
I've always had there's a bit of a juxtaposition there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't religious, but let's just all do the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I didn't feel like I belonged, but I wanted to belong. And I wanted recovery. And I wasn't ready for the NA world because I still had those thoughts of full abstinence. This is just going to be for a while, and then I'll get back into it, right? And so I started hanging out with my sponsor a little bit. We started going to a few more meetings, started doing this sort of stuff. And the creator, where my first 15 days of recovery, I was being shown the 15 Tipi teachings.
These Tipi teachings were just like coming to you, like, or
it was showing me that day. Like,
but by who?
By the creator. I'm saying creator. Maybe my daughter. Like, I don't know. My higher power is what I call my higher power is Father, Sky, Mother Earth, the spirit of my daughter, and a 12-step program. That's my higher power. That's what keeps me clean.
So you were being shown Tipi teachings by a power that was beyond yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And did you realize that at the time?
I realized it on about day 12.
That these are Tipi teachings.
That these things were happening.
Like visions or just like notions?
It just felt like.
So it was like a notion.
Yeah.
Today I feel hope.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense.
Like, the Tipi teachings, they'll have, like, it explains what that virtue is and what it's all about, sort of thing. And like the first one's obedience, there's respect, humility, strength, cleanliness, all these sort of Tipi teachings. And when I was going back to looking at my journals and my detoxing, all that stuff I was writing down on day 3, it was like, or day 1, this was all on obedience. Day 2 was all on respect.
Okay, so you put this together after the
fact. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
On day 6 was all faith, and that's when my daughter came to me in the vessel of that other girl, These things, I was like, I couldn't ignore them. Like, these were all happening to me, right? Day 14, that was ultimate protection. And I went out and did a naming ceremony. My spiritual elder had said, go do a naming ceremony. I want you to ask for your spirit name and your animal and your color, your element, and all that sort of stuff, right? And I had this ceremony, and I asked for all these things, and all my prayers were answered. Right then, immediately pretty much answered, right? So we went to go talk to Elder Betty's her name, right? And she kind of like knew these things had happened to me and were happening to me. And she could see that direct link to the creator that I was given. Maybe it was the spirit of my daughter. That ultimate sacrifice of losing your child is what maybe gave me that strength, that gift of the creator. And then on day 15, it was control flaps, was the 15th pole of the Tipi teachings. And I was going to a sweat ceremony. And I had never participated in a sweat lodge ceremony in my life. I always had these dreams that the first time I do a sweat, it's going to change me. The night before the sweat, I pierced both my ears. I didn't know, like I was in a trance, man. And like cut off my hair, did all these things, like just drastic things that I didn't realize I was doing. I'm going to be a healer. I've been told I'm going to be a healer. And these were sort of actions and ways that healers prepare themselves for sweat ceremonies. I didn't know what I was doing, right? When I got my element's fire. And all of a sudden my phone rings and it's the Maxi Center. And it says, sorry, Derek, sorry to say to you, but we had a fire in the facility. We have to push back your detox, your treatment date.
So that you successfully completed detox, and now you're waiting to go to treatment.
5 days after detox.
Okay.
And
your element
was
burned
fire.
it down.
Exactly. So when I was in detox, I I came to terms with something that happened to me at 3 years old, where I was sexually assaulted by one of my aunties in a trailer we lived in Indian Head.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying it to someone in Detox. It was the very first time I ever said it, where I just said it. I was sexually assaulted when I was 3 years old, right? And he didn't even hear it. And all of a sudden I had this panic, this anxiety attack. And it was just like I couldn't breathe. I hit the ground, you know. And it was the first time I actually dealt with my anxiety without medication. I held an ice cube and I squeezed an ice cube and I focused on that numbness of that ice cube and watching the water drip on the floor and watching the ripple effect in the water. And I was able to get my breathing back. So I remember this, you know, after having the call from the Maxi Center that the fire had happened. And she's saying, fire's the element. And I say, you know what? I was sexually assaulted by my auntie when I was 3 years old, and I burnt that trailer to the ground. And I remember my dad saying, I knew something happened. Something happened to you in that trailer. It was when that happened, I never seen that auntie. That auntie never ever came back around again, Derek.
You burnt a trailer down?
I burnt the trailer to the ground.
At 3 years old?
3 years old, yeah.
You remember?
I remember it. That was my earliest childhood memory. I was burning that trailer down.
On purpose?
On purpose, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I know fire's my element. You know,
Yeah.
There's no denying that and that, right? So I didn't know what to do. And I was unaware that I had other options out there. I thought, oh, I have to go to this Maxi Center. You know, this is a cultural thing. This is connected to my Métis heritage, who I am. This is the treatment center I'm going to have the best results with, you know. And not putting no research into it or thinking anything into it. I said, I could do this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we're going to be a couple, 3 weeks until we open. Okay, I could do a couple, 3 weeks. Well, after a couple, 3 weeks, no calls. So I'm calling them. And they say, oh, no, it will be another week. Oh, another week, another week, another week. And it just wasn't happening, right? Just wasn't happening. And here, like my daughter had passed on December 24th, 2023. And we didn't have her funeral until May 25th of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it was a blessing that I never ended up going to treatment. It was getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back because of the repairs after the fire, right? So I'm kind of white knuckling, but I'm not. You know, I started doing the NA world, started going to NA meetings a little bit and connecting. And this was my friend from Detox. He lived in Indian Head still. And he would pick me up. He would take me to meetings. He just started to take care of me. So let's go to meet. Let's do this, right? And he'd take me up for fellowship after. You know, I couldn't afford anything. You know, I was so broke at this time. I started working a little bit, but every little bit of money was a trigger for me at that time. Every time I got money, I was like, oh, I can buy some drugs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just like, as soon as I got money, I just spend it. I'd buy groceries or I'd buy, you know, cigarettes and Amazon. You know, I started to become a very avid Amazon buyer and buying crap I didn't even need just so I didn't have the money, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm so grateful for this friend in my life because he actually maybe saved my recovery in those early days by just making me accountable, you know, showing up randomly at my door. You know, he actually let me work on his farm a little bit, you know, cleaning his farm equipment, put a little bit of money in my pocket, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, I still kept waiting for this date. Well, finally, that date came in June, where I got my seat to my bed at Maxi Center. So it was up in Prince Albert, and Dad drove me up to Maxi Center, and he was very excited. You know, he was thinking, "This is the greatest thing. My son's going to be cured after this." You know.
Were you still sober though?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was using cannabis a little bit, and the day before my daughter's funeral, actually was the last time I ever touched cannabis too. After that being prescribed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just said, "This is it." I remember I gave it to my kids, you know, because they're cannabis users. My two younger ones, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I get to the treatment, and there's only 2 other clients in there, and you know, it's understaffed. It's just it wasn't a good fit, you know. And here again, my dad was right. You can't cage a wild animal. You know, they told me when I could smoke, when I could pray, when I could do these sort of things. I thought this was a cultural treatment center where I was going to be able to do those sort of things, you know, to pull up my smudge and have a prayer and use tobacco to blow it over my wounds and to do these sort of things, but it wasn't. And they would take us to places where some of the clients used to go use. You know, they had social anxiety and panic attacks when we'd be going to these parks and going to these places where some of their buddies that they used were with, right? So I felt like I became an advocate for some of these clients in there, and I started rebelling against the counselors, which was not a good thing to be doing in a treatment center, right?
Yeah.
And it fed my ego. Like, I know more than these counselors, I'm a teacher, I got this. And I was getting so sick in that place, right? And I remember we had an elder come in, and he asked me to use Wascopio and help him with his prayer and his smudge and do all these sort of things. And said, can you get me a coffee, my boy? So I was like, sure. So I was walking into the rooms, and they wouldn't even let me get a coffee for the elder. And I lost it. I started calling the counselors' names, get off your high horse, what kind of fucking program you got going here? This is bullshit. And I lost it. This was the day to 6 months after the death of my daughter. It was exactly 6 months. And I remember I was so fired up. I went upstairs and I grabbed my medicine bag and I go outside on the picnic table there, and I'm praying, I'm smudging, right? And I started to notice that my daughter came to me when she wanted there to be there in the form of a robin, as a bird, right? And all of a sudden I'm sitting there praying, and this robin comes and lands right on the fence right beside me. I was just like, holy crap, there she is, right? And I start talking to her. And I'm asking, I don't think this is the right place for me, and I'm like, Creator, I need an answer. Should I stay or should I go? And I'm sitting there having a little meditation, and all of a sudden, Derek, can you come on in? So they called me and they said, you're being kicked out. And over to I put my hands together. Thank you for your answer, Creator. Right there. And they're like, you're crazy, man, right?
Yeah.
Well, they put it off that this was 6 months of my daughter's death, that this was my grief. I hadn't dealt with my grief process. This is why I was lashing out like this. They didn't want to admit that their program was inadequate, that they weren't prepared to open up yet. They didn't have the right counsel. They didn't have the right things in place. And I even took it a little further. Like, I know the Minister of Finance in the Métis Nation, I tried to use my power to manipulate them and do all that. So I'm calling her, I'm going to get your funding.
Whoa.
I went rank on.
Hand of God.
I did. I went really, really crazy, right? And I remember having to call my dad. And my dad immediately was fired up. He was mad. Right? I was getting kicked out of treatment. He didn't want to hear my side of the story.
He was fired?
No, he was fired up.
Okay.
He was mad.
Yeah.
He was pissed that I was getting kicked out, right?
Yeah.
And these counselors all come and talk to me and apologize to me that, I'm sorry that this happened, all this sort of stuff. And I think that was after the fact that I knew who was funding their place, right? That they're like, holy shit, right? And I was waiting for my dad, I remember, and he shows up. I could just see that look on his face. When the dad has the look of disappointment, right? And we're sitting down, and my dad, immediately, I think he assumed that I used is why I was getting kicked out, right? That I didn't have it in me. And I tried telling him the story of what happened. And he didn't want to believe me. He didn't trust me. He didn't nothing. And I'm bawling. I'm yelling at him. He's yelling at me, and we're in the car. And, it was an inconvenience to him. He was at a conference out in Waniscawen. Was that what's called, Waniscawen, just outside of Saskatoon here?
Yeah.
And it's a cultural center there, right? And he was staying in a hotel here in Saskatoon. So he's like, you're going to have to come stay with me for a couple of days. I said, okay, fine. And he says, well, they got a nature trail and all that sort of stuff going on out there at Waniscawen. Maybe you want to go check that out while I'm at this conference sort of stuff. I said, sure. So then that next morning, we went out to Waniscawen there, and I took my hand drum and took my medicine kit, and I went for a walk on the land. And I just connected. I felt that presence. They have a commercial medicine wheel out there, right, where it's a man made out of concrete and stuff, but nonetheless, it's a medicine wheel. It's a round medicine wheel. And I'm coming into this, and I got my medicine bag and my drum, and I'm kind of tired. It was a good 2.5, 3 hour walk that I'd taken through the valley and everything to get to this spot. And there's these two older ladies, and they're non-Aboriginal women. Gray haired, I could tell they're white women, right? And so I'm just kind of sitting there waiting for them, not doing nothing. And the lady says, what are you doing here? I said, I come to have a prayer. Well, don't let us bother you. Go ahead, do your thing. I said, oh, okay. I said, if you guys want to stay here in the circle, that's fine. It's not, whatever. No, we'll stay here. We want to see this. So I go and set up my 4 medicines, my tobacco, my sage, my sweetgrass, and my cedar on the 4 directions, right? And I go and I get all I pray and I smudge, I make my offerings, I do all that sort of stuff, and I'm playing my drum. And, after this ceremony, it's like 6 months and 1 day after the death of my daughter. And that's why I went to go pray for that day, was to just be free of that grief, that pain, that every day waking up crying pain of my daughter. And I could feel it. Like it was just like it was pulled out of me. Like took my breath away. I'm crying. I'm just in myself. And the one lady says, "Can I ask you can I ask you what this is all about?" And I said, I lost my daughter 6 months ago, and I want to be relieved of that pain, that grief, that day-to-day pain. I said, I'm going to have this pain for the rest of my life, but it's immobilizing me where I can't function some days, and I don't want that no more. I want to be able to get on with my life and know that she's going to be part of my life. And the one lady pipes up, says, I got 27 years clean. The other lady says, I'm 31 years sober. So I sat out there in this medicine wheel for 2 hours and basically had a meeting with these women in this medicine wheel, right? Mm-hmm. Just talking. And it was mostly me talking and them listening, right, of what I was all going through. I think that was one of those defining moments of my early spiritual upbringing of coming into recovery, that I became a believer in that spirituality, right? Mm-hmm. That it didn't have to be a brown person that I get my spirituality from. It could be anyone. It could be anything. It could be animals. It could be plants. It could be the air. Like there's spirituality in everything, from the radio. Anywhere and everywhere I go, I experience these spiritual things now that I never ever did.
There's a saying in the program, I know you've heard it, says God's either everything or he's nothing.
Yeah, very much so.
It can't be halfway.
No, it can't be. And I almost relapsed, actually, when I was doing my resentments and writing them all down. Of just looking at all those people I hated. I wanted to get even with how to settle the score. And then once I had to look at myself at all them and look at my part in it, I was like, oh man, I was sick, right? Mm-hmm. So when I did my step 4 the first time, it wasn't so bad because I talked to my sponsor about a lot of that sort of stuff. I had dealt with some of it. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it still was, right? And I put the work in. Like I felt like I'm gonna hit this out the park. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be cured, right? I was waiting for that moment of the spiritual awakening. Well, where is this sort of thing, right? And it didn't happen. And then I started to realize, and I look back in it, of how much it had changed me, and the different man that first set of steps made me become, and how I looked at my disease, and how I was able to come to terms with my past, and let that go. That past is a place of reference, not a residence, and that helped me really see that in that moment. Mm-hmm. And that was my spiritual awakening.
Derek, so you do medicine work now.
Yes,
and
I do.
And you jig.
Yeah.
And you speak to be, in fact, great job on the stage at Empower to Recover there back in October. That was amazing. Where can people find you? Where can people find you to reach out to you about maybe having you do these things?
Well, I'm out in Regina, of course. I'm teaching at Pasco First Nation now, teaching a grade 9 class, back into the classroom now. Of course, I'm all in the recovery world out in Regina, but of course, my Facebook, right? It's Derek Fuzz Racette. I'm always on there, and I could always be reached that way. Mm-hmm.
All right, Derek. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. This has been a hell of an adventure walking through your story with you, man. Thanks for the trust. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you for letting me come on.
All right. Take good care.
Yeah, you too.
Hold up. If this hit home or made you think, help us get these stories out there. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and before you go, check out another episode. The more you engage, the more the algorithm shares these voices with the people who need to hear them. Big shout out to SEIU West, our official equipment sponsor, improving the lives of working people and their families and leading the way to a more just and humane society. Find their link in the show notes.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.